Welcome to the Radical Lifestyle Podcast, brought to you by Generation to Generation, where you'll be inspired by the past, equipped for the present, and prepared for the future as we engage in conversations with people from around the world. If you've been inspired by the guests that we've had on the podcast, please like, subscribe, comment, hit notification bells, whatever you can do on the platforms that you're listening on, so that more people have the opportunity of hearing these and engaging in our community. Hello everyone, this is Andrew and Daphne from Generation to Generation, and our guest today is Robby Dawkins. Now, Robby's been on before. If you haven't heard the previous episode, I'll put that link in the description. I recommend you go and check that out. But Robby, for people that haven't heard that previous episode, could you just say a bit about where you're from and what you do?
Yeah, I'm living here in the United States, particularly Dallas, Texas, and I'm basically, to put it in a nutshell, which I'm terrible at shortening anything, but basically just going around training and equipping the underground church throughout the Middle East, especially focused on Muslims and closed nations, for training and equipping the church in what we call power evangelism, a term John Wimber sort of coined. But that just basically teaching, the believers there to live the book of Acts and use signs and wonders to bring people into a relationship with Christ. And it's the greatest job in the world. And I love every bit of it. So that's it. Boy, I think I told that shorter than ever.
Yeah, that was very quick.
Very good.
And for people that want to find out more after they've heard this, where can they do that?
Yeah, I mean, my website, Robby Dawkins, Robby with a Y, Dawkins at .com, just robbydawkins.com. And there's tons of information, some videos, things like that you can see to get an idea of what we're doing and how we're working. Also social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and just re-signed back up on Twitter. I'd been banned until the new purchase deal had been made. Now, mysteriously, I went to sign back in, and boom, my account popped back up. I'm like, oh, wow, great.
Welcome back.
Yeah, I'd just like you to know I had a quiet word with them about it. Yeah. And so
I knew Daphne was the hookup somehow. Yeah. I knew.
I'm glad it worked.
But yeah, it's so crazy. I made a post where I made a comment about when back in, it was interesting because I made so many posts about evangelizing Muslims. I'd gotten multiple warnings about that, but was shut down because of when they did the radical Buddhists went through and killed 333 Christians in Sri Lanka. I think it was 2018. Went through churches during Easter and killed 333 Christians. I said, let's take a toll. Let's make the enemy pay for this, and let's go after 1,000 Buddhists to bring them to Christ and share the love of Jesus as the revenge of God. Well, they heard that as inflammatory language because I said bring them to Christ, and so anyway, they shut me down. Yeah, so
you can't be doing that.
Worth being shut down over.
Well, as soon as you came on, we knew that you were back on Twitter because you're wearing a T-shirt that says uncancelled. So you're obviously celebrating. So
I was cancelled, but now I'm uncancelled.
Yeah, so we'll celebrate with you, okay?
I'll put your link in the description so it's there for people to go and listen to.
Thank you.
In the previous episode, because everyone's going to go listen to it anyway. But, we talked a bit about your heart for kind of going to those dangerous places, where that came from. You just mentioned now about reaching Muslims and, people that are, maybe a little edgy for your average believer. Can you talk a bit about your heart for the Middle East? I know you do quite a lot of stuff out there. So just talk about the Middle East. Why have you got such a heart for that region?
Years ago, when I planted a church in the Chicago area back in 1996, And about, I think it was around 1998, 1999, I started the particular denomination I was with at the time was pressing us to do what they call partnering with particular nations for church planting and things like that. And I started looking into, and friends of mine, and this is not to slam them, but they were like, yeah, we want to start a partnership with the Bahamas or Jamaica or in Spain, or everybody's wanting to start these partnerships, or Portugal, in these really nice vacation areas. And of course, I've been to some of those in vacations. I'm like, man, yeah, those are nice,
Yeah, those suntans can be really oppressive. So
yes, both yes and no. But at the same time, it was like, man, I'm like, and I remember the guy who was over the missions. I said, where are people not wanting to go? And where are people not wanting to? And he goes, we're having a really hard time with anybody partnering with any Muslim countries or any closed nations such as Cuba or South Korea or anything like that. And he goes, and it's just because it's going to be impossible to do. Well, as soon as he said that, I was like, hang on, I don't think impossible fits in God's language. And so started really, looking into and exploring. Back when I was a kid during the Iranian Revolution, I remember there was a boy at our school that was Iranian, and he was treated so terribly. Everybody saw the Iranians as the enemy, much like, probably a lot of people are looking at, the Russians right now and going, you're my enemy. Well, no, it's the government. It's not the people, and so I remember having a real heart of compassion for this kid, because I felt he was so unjustly treated and literally, I mean, getting beat up almost every day. And he was a great kid. He was a Christian. I mean, this was at a Christian school, and it just broke my heart, to see that kind of treatment. And so it sort of pulled on my heartstrings from way back then. And so I ended up, reaching out and trying to make connections in Iran and stuff like that. And again, everybody was saying, you can't do it. It's not possible, and I've learned that as soon as that starts being said, I'm going, this must be God, when people are going, nah, I can't do that. Nah, it's impossible. I'm like, this sounds like a God thing. And so sort of rerouted a lot of my thinking. I'd been working and helping some churches in Lithuania, and then shifted, didn't move away from Lithuania, continued to work with Lithuania for another 10 years, still work with Lithuania in the sense of friends that I'm coaching and helping and supporting periodically. But then all of a sudden switched to Iran. And then with Iran, of course, at that time, we were, at war with Afghanistan, and began to stir in my heart, started making some connections there. The Christian population at that time was so small, so minute, and then very hard to find any connections. Email was, there wasn't really a ton of texting at that time or anything. It was, email was sort of the new thing. And well, probably not new for everybody else, but new for me at that point. But then started working and investigating and trying to build some relationships, and just started saying, how can I help you? How can I serve you? How can I bless you? Not even going, can I come there? Just, because my church was an inner city, very poor inner city church, and we didn't have much money, but I was just like, if I can send you, some money, wire you some money, I'll do that. Whatever I can do to help, And so just started with that and started just kind of sewing into them. And then all of a sudden, started communicating different things that I was training my church in, that I was training my children in healing and prophecy and ministering God's manifest presence, casting demons out, things like that, that I just kind of, growing up in a pastor's home, I mean, Andrew, I'm sure you can identify, we saw those things on a regular basis. We saw, we maybe not prolifically in healing and prophecy, but definitely, doing a lot of inner city work. We were doing a lot of stuff with people that are demonized. And so I was very familiar with God's power. Well, I didn't realize how unfamiliar they were. And so began to go, man, we just need to pour more into this. So we started developing, training and started doing things. I started sending materials. I paid for John Wimber's Power Healing book to be translated into Farsi. Now we've had it translated into Dari and into Arabic, and, Carol Wimber, John's widow, gave permission for us to do that. And just started, circulating different materials like that, for people to, read, get equipped in, things like that. And then we started getting feedback of how powerful it was and the effectiveness. And so then I went on a trip to Armenia, which that's when I first slipped over into Iran. When I say slipped over, I just went for a few days, met with a few key leaders up in the north, but crossed a border, with a neighboring country where I was doing a training where we brought some Iranians there to train and equip. And man, the results of that, the response, the communication that came back of all the incredible things that were happening just out. And we couldn't afford to bring a lot. We only could afford to bring 3. But the fruit was incredible. And so you know how it works with the underground church, you give a little bit over here and all of a sudden it spreads over everywhere, and that's, especially if they're seeing the results, and that's what happened. And so, and people have to realize this is before the, all of the reports of the man in white appearances, to Muslims and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sure that was happening. It's been happening for thousands of years. I mean, hello, Daniel 10, but the reality was for so many of these people, that didn't happen. And then we started hearing those reports of people having dreams, having visions, having things like that. And that, of course, made the believers want to step it up even more. And so from there, just started regularly doing trainings, going to a couple of different neighboring countries, border countries, where it was easy for Iranians, especially, to get visas to come over. 2007, went to Afghanistan. 2007, went to Afghanistan for a couple of days. Didn't meet with anybody because everybody was too afraid to meet with me as a obvious Westerner there. And there's some tourism in Iran because there's so many ancient sites and even biblical sites. So Westerners being spotted there is not as big of a shock or anything. But in Afghanistan, the only Westerners that were showing up were typically either with Western companies doing business, or, the main ones were people that were, related to the military. And so it was amazing to go into, just be on the soil, and something a seed just got dropped in my heart in that time, and it was 15 years ago. And, I had been doing some stuff with them about 5 years before that, but it was just, like I said, through resources and, email communication, things like that. But it was, it just launched something in me, and everybody there was like, nobody comes here. Like, we don't have anybody, nobody comes to train us. Nobody comes, and this is before really, YouTube was up and running, but it was limited. It was, so being able to access videos and resources for training, it was just, they were very isolated people. And I just was like, man, somebody's got to go in person. Excuse me. And so that's how all that really started. And it was mainly, John Wimber used to say, God, treat me like a nickel in your pocket. Spend me any way you want me. Just treat me like small change in your pocket. And wherever there's a need, just throw me there. Just toss me there. And that kind of really became the posture of my heart, is, where other people don't want to go and where other people don't want to. And it wasn't out of a thing of trying to be cool or trying to be, impressive. It was just, man, if nobody's going, how are they going to know? And how are they, as the scripture says, and so I was stirred in the heart, and I was like, I've got to do this. And I had many sleepless nights thinking about it, not in fear or anything like that, but going, how do I do it? How do I launch? And people are always you guys get the same question. People are always, how did you start with this? How did this happen? How do you, just start, start somewhere, start anywhere, just start. And God will open doors, and he did. And so it was remarkable, and it was incredible, how that happened and how the Lord worked. And so, and then there's doors began to open, and they were very slow, especially Afghanistan. Iran was a little bit faster, but, it was still slow. And, and just started following one lead to the next, and all that stuff. And so it's just incredible how it worked out.
Yeah. Sorry, you can say something.
I was going to say, so we had an experience of something which I won't go into now. It looked impossible, but we just packed up our bags and we said to ourselves, we're just going to give this a go. And I was telling someone, and they said, it's the time to just give it a go. I think we build up this image of we've got faith, and faith like them, we've got to do this and that. But quite honestly, I would say most of what's happened to us is just because in our frail flesh, and without saying, oh, we're people of faith who do this, we just gave it a go.
Yeah, people hear us and go, wow, your faith. Well, not really. We kind of just got in the car and went to the airport. Not wanting to sound too unspiritual, but sometimes we just, might as well just have a go, see what happens.
Yeah. The obedience to just that, it's kind of sounds like a old Southern pastor type cliched language, but I always used to say, don't worry about the no, the KNOW, but worry about the go. Just focus on the go, not the no. Because we're like, well, I've got to know all this stuff first. I got to know all this, and we do need to do research. We do need to know what we're getting into, that type of thing. We need to be prepared to the best of our ability. But I'm always telling people, don't let that hold you up. Because otherwise you can kind of talk yourself out of things or look and think the obstructions are there when they're actually not.
Yeah, just paralyze yourself.
Yeah.
One of the things that we say to people is God's no can be as loud as his yes. So some people sit around waiting for the yes. We just get going and wait for the no. Wait for him to say, no, actually not. So it's to trust his no as well as trust his yes.
That's me too. That's how I've lived, and it's just the best way, because my assumption is always God wants somebody there, and if I'm willing, why not me? I have had times where I've had to stop and stay focused on particular areas. Like, we're kind of getting bombarded by invitations to Africa, and a lot of people do, and different things. And I'm like, man, if it's not within the sphere of what we're targeting, we've got to really stay focused on that. And, but at the same time, looking at those types of places, for gathering purposes, of how, there may be people there that would be willing to go and serve in some, part of the Middle East or Central Asia, to help. And so I try to consider that as well, in those types of things. But yeah, just that's, I think that's just the best way to live our Christian life, is just always assuming God wants me there until he says stop, Yeah.
You mentioned, there's a few pieces, but You've got this heart for sort of the more risky, dangerous situations, those kinds of places. Your heart for the Middle East. Talked about Afghanistan. And last time, before we started recording, we were talking a bit about this. Afghanistan, both of us were involved with helping to rescue people. And we had very similar journeys in it. And both of us had no intention of ever actually getting involved with that situation. But things spiraled very quickly for both of us. Can you talk about when you started to see things unfolding there? What was the spark which caused you to say, actually, do you know what? I need to intervene in some way to help some people. What was it that caused you to do that?
I don't know that was ever a like a decision type of thing. It just kind of like God wrangles you into it. He just pulls you in, and you're like. But I would probably say that, when all of a sudden, and when people you're working with, their lives are being threatened, they're in severe, threat of being killed, and the realities of those threats, you can't help but step in and be a part of the intervention and be a part of, protecting them, saving them, and so these are people that, for me, people, not all of them, but I would say out of the people that we've helped rescue, like probably maybe a sixth of them, I've been in their homes. I've been in their, I've been with them. I played with their children. I've, eaten, they've made dinner for me. They've had, and there had been a lot of this personal interaction. And so all of a sudden, with this serious threat, it was like, what do I do? And for me, the particular night where, the Taliban swept into Kabul. They were already doing it in other places, but when they swept into Kabul, the absolute, I had assumed that the Afghan army would be able to resist for a few months, and what we're seeing happening in Ukraine is what I was, of course, hoping would happen there, because literally I've never met a single person other than one person that was in the Taliban that was a leader there that I ended up praying for and ministering to, and ended up, he's a brother now. But that was in support of the Taliban. And even he told me, I never really agreed with it. It was just, in the area, it's Pashtun, and in the area that he was in, it was either do this or die type of thing. And so I had to, and so many of the Taliban, that's how they've got wrangled into it. And so all of a sudden seeing this serious threat and seeing this happen. And I made a little video that was just my operations manager, I was texting all my staff, poor things. I was keeping them up because it was all going on in the middle of the night. And I'm like, oh dear God, we got to be ready. I'm probably going to have to be sending, wiring some money. I'm probably going to have to be, and all of a sudden, and they were like, make a live video right now, put it out on Instagram immediately, letting people know what's happening and the direct connection you're having. And I did that, and and in the middle of it, of course, I broke down crying, and I'm just heartbroken. And that the crazy thing is that video went viral, and it actually highlighted for me how few people have any connection, or how few people were working with Afghanistan. You guys know, because you work there, so how few, we are who have actually been, in training them, helping them in any form or fashion. So it all of a sudden, everything just went on high alert, and And at first I was stressed because I was like, well, we have some limited resources to do this. But I was like, how do I help? I immediately started looking at flights and going, is there a way, this before the airport was shut down and everything. It was, they were protecting the airport. They've always protected that airport, fairly well. And part of it is because there's some, international security that bases out of that airport. And so anyway, all of a sudden it just became all hands on deck. It was like, clear the schedule. We got to do everything we can to start saving our friends' lives. And so it just was, I really don't think it was a decision. It was, I just got wrangled into it, which of course, I thank God that I did. And then of course, people, God TV from there in the UK, people were contacting me from there. Can you come on and talk about this? The people from all over all of a sudden started saying, hey, you've been working there. And it was interesting because I tried for a decade at least to get Westerners even interested. And it just seemed like nobody was interested. I'm like, guys, this is, I would go to speak and I'd be like, this is the most dangerous country. You partner with us to help them, and it was just not working. And so I then was like, finally there was some interest, finally there was some awareness, finally that provided resources to be able to step up and to really start helping people. But it just was in the moment. One of the things I've noticed, if you look at the life and ministry of Jesus, is Jesus is frequently being interrupted. Bartimaeus shouting out, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus was going someplace. He's walking down the street. He's heading a direction. He's got someplace to be. And this interruption of this desperate man, caught his attention. And I love it because it says Jesus stopped and turned, and so it was kind of our stop and turn moment of, the level of desperation was so high. And it was just, and still is. I mean, a lot of people don't realize, many of the Afghans that are currently living in, and I'll just say it now, I think it's safe to say, in Pakistan and in Uzbekistan, and, they're in Iran, they're being threatened with being, extradited and sent back to Afghanistan. And if they do, many of them will be imprisoned and killed, because so many that fled were believers. And so there's still an immense threat, and people don't realize that. I probably haven't communicated that to, my following enough, that this is still a very serious crisis. But it just got pulled in because of the demand and the need and the desperation.
I think there's probably two responses to that. First of all, I don't think it's a matter, and I'm sure it is for you, it's not a matter of should we or could we or anything like that. It's more, how can we not? I mean, how can you not do something? It's
Daphne, that's so good. Yeah.
It's completely the wrong questions that we get asked. How can we not? And I've forgotten what the second one now. I had a very profound thought when you were speaking, but that's the best I can come out with. But I think it's the, in as much as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, which Jesus was probably talking about the Jewish people as his brethren, but it sure applies here. You've done it to me, and you saw I was in prison. This is Jesus we're talking about. We're not just. Yes. We're not talking about, well, there was this man. Well, that's bad enough, but this is Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think if we pass by on the other side, one day we're going to be called to account for it.
Yes.
I'd rather spend my life being called to account for doing too much than being called to account for not doing enough. Because I think if I get called to account for anything, it might be that, but I don't care. I'm just going to keep going. And that's all there is to it.
Yeah. That's so good. I love that. And you go ahead. Sorry, Andrew.
Oh, no, go on.
No, it's just, if every believer sort of operated from that perspective, we would see the world would be changed. We would see global transformation, and so many of us are, thinking, oh, well, God has somebody there, I remember hearing a story of a minister who one time, one of the people in his church came up to him and said, hey, a homeless guy, he pulled up for a men's Bible study or something outside of the church. And there was a homeless guy there that just wanted some food. And he goes, nobody was there. And so I took him to, a fast food place, bought him some food. And then he said, well, he goes, is there any way that you could help me? I've got a few clothes. I don't have much, but I just want to wash them. I'm just tired of them smelling bad. He goes, so I took him to a laundromat and had them wash the clothes and do all this stuff. And then he said, and do you know anybody who has an old sleeping bag? And he's like, well, I got one, I'll give one to you. And he gave him a sleeping bag. And he was telling the pastor, he goes, but the thing I'm upset about is, where was the church? The church should have been here doing this for the guy. The church should have been here. Where was the church? Why wasn't anybody here at the church? And the pastor looks at him and he goes, you are the church, and you did. We did something because you did it, and you're a part of us, and we're a part. And I was like, that's it. We're always looking, why aren't they doing this? No, we are them. We are the church. We are the hands and feet of Jesus. And if we would just operate from that perspective in every scenario and every situation, so many of these issues would be resolved and so much would be done. Just if it was just even right around us where we're at. It doesn't have to be overseas. It doesn't. Matter of fact, I always tell people, changing the world starts across the street. It starts with the neighbor beside you. If don't hit me up to come on I always tell people, don't hit me up to come on a trip to one of these more dangerous, but I'll take people on trips to train them and equip them, but they're always wanting to go to one of the more dangerous guys. I said, don't hit me up for that if you're not doing it at home. Because part of your training just starts where you are. Just do it with whoever, and start there. And, the Lord will open the doors for other things too. Yeah. But not that I really say no to people coming or anything like that. It's more of just from the standpoint of saying, make the impact where you're at. Start there.
Yeah. People may be listening and go, well, this is all good for you to say. I mean, you're Robby Dawkins and, you are the Kirks. Obviously, you can help in these kinds of situations where other people, your average person might go, I couldn't do that, and kind of get paralyzed like we were talking about earlier. But, for people listening, when I got involved, if you'd have said to me before Afghanistan, if you'd have said, look, let's imagine the fall of Afghanistan. Okay, and Andrew, how would you start extracting people? I'd be like, I got no idea.
I had no idea.
Well, you want me to help rescue people? I've got no idea how I would do that, who I would even call, all this kind of stuff. Now, Obviously, I knew a few people pretty quickly, but, I was just checking on some friends that lived out there, missionaries out there. And sure. They managed to get out, went back to their country. Mm-hmm. Just saying, how are you doing? And they said, we're out, but we've got a lot of people that we don't necessarily believe all of them should leave. Some of them should stay there and face whatever it is they need to face. But they said, we want to at least give them the opportunity to go, to leave if they want to, but it feels impossible. And like you, the word impossible was used. And then I was like,
like a flag.
Yeah, red rag to a bull. It's like, is it really impossible? And so then, I made a couple calls and it just spiraled from there. The people that we end up in touch with, or working with, or trying to help get people out. But it's not like beforehand. If you'd have asked me how I would help in that kind of situation, I could have said to you, this is what I would do. It's just like you said, certain doors opened. We walked through those. I was willing to walk through them. And it just led to all kinds of crazy situations. So just to encourage people that are listening, just be willing. If you see a situation that, it's not like we had it all figured out ourselves. We figured this out as we were going along, and not just us. Most of the people that I end up working with in the situation and connecting with, for them as well. They were just
That's
trying to piece
story.
it together as we were walking through this journey. Now obviously into the future, we would know better how to respond in those situations, having had to put a game plan together this time. But, we're all, both of us, we're just taking one step at a time, and we're willing to be used by God. And we're willing to say yes and just see how he helped us piece it together.
Before we started, go ahead.
I'll just say quick, I want to throw one word of caution into people listening, I think. I mean, they look at you, Robbie, and could look at you and think, you can bulldoze through anything. I mean, might look at me and think it's impossible more, but anyway. But it does come with a cost. It's not, there is a cost to doing this. It's not just all bravado and we bowl in. And I just want to throw that out. I mean, I've watched the cost, I've walked the cost in many ways, but just go back to Afghanistan. I saw Andrew weeping, absolutely weeping as he looked at these names on that. And how can I get the gate open? And how can I do this? I watched it. And, situations, obviously, I've been in as well. And so I'm just saying, get up and go.
Yeah.
But count the cost. I'm doing this. I'm going to do it no matter what it costs. But don't go in it and say, I didn't know it was going to be like this. Or I thought it was going to be easy. So I just wanted to throw that one in.
And the thing is when we say yes, when we respond with the action, it's all of a sudden the pieces start coming together. Many of the, like, trying to find people that will smuggle people to the border, that will get people across borders, even illegally, because we had to. Like I didn't have contacts for that, but as you begin to start stepping, God sends you the people, the resource, the connections to do it, because, the scripture says the steps of a righteous person are ordered of God. And, as you start stepping, God starts ordering. But it's not until you start stepping that those things come. And so God's not going to lay everything out, for you, because many times it's can I trust you to follow through? Can I trust you that you'll run with this, that you'll go with it? But as you begin to step, as you begin to, the connections, the resources financially, other things will come as you do. And it's just in the doing, we were trying to raise enough money to send one giant big truck of medical supplies and food and diapers and things like that into Ukraine. And before it was over, we had 3. We've sent 2 in so far. We've got a third that we're working on. But all of a sudden, we were just hoping to fill the one. But as you go, but I wouldn't have even gotten involved with that had one of my Ukrainian friends not reached out and said, "Hey, can you help us?" And he's like, "I'll even take in just give me a van load, help me get a van and help me get a load, and I'll go." And then, all of a sudden, it turned into a giant truck, and it just as you begin to step, God starts adding. And I think he responds to the obedient. He responds to those who are going to follow. And so many people, I'm telling you right now, anybody watching this, if you're in depression, if you struggle with anxiety, if you're struggling with you want to break it, you start stepping out in these things. It'll break the power of that, because you're all of a sudden, I think there's an emptiness and a frustration within us if we're not doing what God had made us to do. And you will none of us can say, well, God didn't call me to that. God didn't call me to help rescue a brother. The scripture says our persecuted brothers and sisters, we're to treat them like our very own family. That was an instruction from the word of God. Treat them as if they're your very, very own family. And when we respond like that, and we take action like as if it's a sister or a brother or a child, that this is happening to, man, God will resource you. I mean, he really will. And it's just, he's looking though for the people. And we were saying before the program started, he's not looking for those with the talent and ability, because God's a gift giving God. He's looking for people with availability. He's willing for those who are available for him to send, who are available to do it. And just do it. I met a woman here in the United States who's helped with some of our key leaders in Afghanistan. Never been to Afghanistan in her life, never been. Just a stay-at-home mom who jumped into action because she saw this crisis and started, contacting the U.S. State Department, developed these resources, developed the resource and connections, that had no money, had none of that, but then was able to start sending information to some key underground church leaders of, hey, go to here, go at this point, go to this area. There's somebody there that'll meet you. And she's sitting at home, watching her kids, on her laptop. But she did it and rescued some of the most key leaders, all the top guys that I'm connected with, helped with them we were just trying to get them to Iran. She helped to get them here to the United States, and if people will just do anything, just step into anything, God will make you have the connections. And I mean, can you imagine this woman who was sort of feeling like, I'm kind of just, not doing much, but raising a few kids here and which is a lot, don't want to diminish that. But the point of it is that all of a sudden was able to be instrumental in saving some of the key leaders of the underground church in Afghanistan, just because she took action. I mean, what's waiting for you? What does God have out there that he needs that you'll say yes to? And if you'll just step out in anything, I mean, the Lord then will start, he'll start giving you more. If he can trust you with the little, he'll trust you with the multitude. And so it really is powerful when you stop and think about the impact that anybody can make if they'll just take action.
So one of the things that has statistically been proved, and we have seen happen, is that the more people there are, the fewer people act. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We were at an airport or somewhere, and a lady was screaming the other side of the room, just screaming. Everybody just looked at her. Everybody, nobody moved. So I got up, went all the way round to her to see if she was okay. And they did this survey where they had someone lying on the ground in a crowd. Nobody took any notice. And then, they were lying there on purpose, and then there were gradually less people. And it wasn't until there were about 2 people walking by that anybody took any notice.
Really interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is. And you see it happen. My daughter with a friend of hers was in Scotland last week, and there was a fight breaking out. Mm-hmm. And they were onto one girl, I think it was, and everybody was watching. Well, nobody moved. I mean, they walked by. Daniela stood in front of the attackers and went, "No, you don't." And the other girl immediately flung herself on top of the girl who was being attacked.
Wow.
And they stopped it and moved on, but people were watching. And I don't mean this, that there's too many of us. Although sometimes I think we should be scattered amongst the nations, not all couched where there's 10 churches on every street. But
exactly. Come on, preach that.
Well, I often say that. I mean, we were driving somewhere recently, and I counted the churches in a quarter of a mile, and I said, what are they going to tell the nations that haven't got one? But I think there is a mentality you have to break when you are part of a church. When you are part of a community, you must be aware that you have to make an extra effort to step out and do it, even when nobody else is, because there is something in our psychology, something about us, something in our sociology that holds us back when there's a lot of us. Now, it's probably a useless piece of information, but I thought I'd throw it in.
No, it is interesting. It's so true. I remember as a 12-year-old boy, just, on, my parents pastored inner city churches and stuff like that. And there was this guy just out that, I don't know what had happened. I think the guy dropped some money and the homeless guy picked it up and was trying to run away with it. And this guy just, and what I saw was like $5. The guy was taking back from the older man that was he shoved him on the ground and grabbed back his $5, but he just began to kick him in the face, kick him in the stomach. Brutal. And this guy, he was a big guy and he was just pouncing all over this guy. And I remember shouting, and they were loud and people were standing around watching. And I remember just shouting, somebody help him. And nothing was happening. And I finally got in the eye view of the guy. And I was just a 12-year-old boy, but I got in eye view and I just started saying, mercy, mercy. I didn't know what to say. I said, please have mercy. Please have mercy. And finally the guy just stopped and, just looked at me really angry and then just walked away. And I helped the man up and I'm looking around at 20 people that were just standing there watching. And I just was like, why didn't you do anything? Why didn't these were adults and here I am just a kid, but, we're always waiting for, Daphne, we're always waiting for somebody else. And so many times when people see so many, they kind of get scared away from it, but it's the time to step in and it's the time to, to engage. And we have a world of people that are just so desperate for Christ and so desperate to hear the gospel. We have that answer. We have that solution. How are we doing it? What are we doing with that? And then what's going to be our answer to the Lord? We got to remember the Bema seat is to judge what it's not the great white throne and judging our own lives and our behavior and all, but judging what did we do with what God gave us? What did we do with what we saw? What did we do with the good news that we knew? And there's an account for that. And so we have to keep that in mind. Of course, I'm not driven by the fear of a judgment of that because I've been blessed to do a lot. But just the reality of I want to be able to, I would like for the Father to look at me like I'm sure he'll say to you, Daphne, and gone, well, you went over, you did 20 people's worth or 200 or 2,000, I would rather that than be like, why'd you bury this? Why did you stick it in the ground? We just got to start and we just got to be stirred in the heart and move with that because that's the heart of the Father. Your bit of empathy that you feel for somebody isn't really driven by you. It's you reflecting the heart of the Father. And there's an accounting for that with what we've done and what we do, So anyway.
Well, I again want to throw something else in there because I think people say, well, I'm not good enough, or I can't do it, or I'm this, I'm that, and the other. And I just want to throw in a story that happened to me, which I hope will completely wash away any of that. And, if you've ever seen somebody repent, I was doing the best repentance that you've ever seen in your life. The tears were going. I was doing the lot. And I was saying to Jesus, I'm sorry if I served you out of performance. I'm sorry if I served you out of dysfunction. I'm sorry if I served you, to get myself forward. You would not believe the things I was repenting on. It was good stuff. And then I felt Jesus tap me on the shoulder and he said, Daphne, and I said, just a minute, let me get through this first. And then he taps me on the shoulder again.
I'm talking to somebody, Jesus.
Yeah, I'm doing this and I'm doing it good. I was doing good. And 3 times he tapped me on or however many, he tapped me on the shoulder. And in the end, I thought, you know what, he's not going away. I had that attitude. I said, what do you want? I'm just doing this repentance. And he said this, Robbie, and I want everybody to hear it. He said, Daphne, I want to thank you. And I said, but I'm in the middle of all this. And he said this, you could have used your dysfunction for the world, but I want to thank you for using your dysfunction to bless my kingdom. I have never heard that preached. It's always do it for the right reason, do it for this, do it for that. And I want to say to people who are listening, don't matter how dysfunction you are, give that dysfunction to Jesus. If I was a perfectionist boy, his kingdom got blessed by my perfection. You know, he looks at our heart, and don't let anything like that put you off, because he wants to thank you.
You often say to people, it is good to do it for the right reasons.
Well,
but you can work that out on the journey. At least use your dysfunction for the kingdom, and let him work it out as you go along.
Yeah, but don't sit around waiting for perfection, because we wouldn't have done anything.
No, we wouldn't be doing anything if we were perfect before we started.
But that's what so Jesus clearly said to me. So
yeah. Robbie, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. We've loved getting to talk to you and to be able to connect. And hopefully we can do many more. But thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I know you were just over here in Europe, and now you're back home again. Get some rest, enjoy the coffee, and we'll catch you later.
Yeah.
Bless you guys. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Remember, if it inspired you, share it with others so we can see more people engaged in this community.